Here is our little splash screen. We are at Tech Talks, and we are going to move to our first exciting speaker. Let me introduce to you my very good friend, Sian Proctor. Sian is a geoscience professor at South Mountain Community College. I live vicariously through her because by day she's a teacher, but by night, really not by night, but in her free time and summers, she combines her love of science and travel into these amazing adventures, including things like the 2016 Astronomy in Chile program, or her sabbatical work with FEMA, or some of the other work that she's done with some other very exciting science and educational experiments. So today in her presentation, what she's going to share with you is her most recent adventure as a NOAA teacher at sea. So please help me welcome to the stage Sian Proctor.
Thank you, Donna. Hello, everyone. It is a real pleasure to be here today to talk to you about my NOAA Teacher at Sea experience. I like audience participation, so I hope you will not be shy as we collectively go to sea. Who here has been on a cruise or a ship or a vessel before? Raise your hand. Okay, so a lot of you are the audience. I have actually done 2 cruises. I have done those carnival cruises where you go to the Bahamas for a weekend. But for most of my life, I have been landlocked. However, in undergrad, I took oceanography. And at ASU, as a graduate student, I was a TA for oceanography. So I have always been interested in our oceans. When I learned about the NOAA Teacher at Sea program, I knew I had to apply because it's this amazing opportunity to work with NOAA scientists and, we're ahead one, sorry. It's an amazing opportunity to work with NOAA scientists and to get a really good idea of what life at sea is going to be like. Ooh, it's clicking a little fast. The NOAA Teacher at Sea program, when you apply, there are 3 types of cruises that you can go on. One is a fisheries cruise, the second is an oceanographic cruise, and the third is a hydrographic or hydrologic cruise. So when you fill out your application, you check which type you would like to go on. So here, you guys in the audience, who here would go on a fisheries cruise? Raise your hand. Oh, I got a couple of people right here who would go on fisheries. Who here would go on an oceanographic cruise? All right, I got a couple more people. And who here are hydrographic? Okay, I am a geoscientist. My training is actually in geology, so I like rocks. I am not a biology person at all. So when I filled out my application, I chose oceanographic and I chose hydrographic, and I left fisheries blank. Needless to say, I was a little bit shocked when NOAA reached out to me and said, how would you like to go and spend 3 weeks on the NOAA ship Oscar Dyson, which is a trawler or fisheries survey, studying pollock in Alaska? Pollock. I had to look up pollock. How many of you know what pollock is? Raise your hand. All right, pollock is the fish that they use to make imitation crab. I had no idea. So needless to say, I was like, ooh, do I want to go to Alaska to study pollock for 3 weeks? How many of you are A? Oh, I got a couple of A people who are like, yeah, I'd do that, of course. Who are my B people? King crab, right? Yep, if you feed me well, I will go. And how many of you are C? No way. I was definitely in the BC category, and I was talking to my husband. I'm like, fish, pollock. And he's like, but it's Alaska, you've got to go. And one of the things that I always tell my students is, you're going to have fears when you're pushed outside of your comfort zone. But it is so important for you to overcome those fears, because most of your learning and your growth comes when you are pushed outside of your comfort zone. Now, I love the fact that NOAA uses the word cruise when they talk about their expeditions, right? Because when I was on a cruise, this is how I am, right? Feet up, beautiful, warm, tropical waters, everything's great, reading a book. When they told me that I was going to be going to Kodiak, Alaska on a Fisheries cruise for pollock, all I could think was deadliest catch, girl overboard, all of those things. So I had a lot of fears about going, on this expedition. But I didn't let it stop me from making that decision, because those fears, most of the time, are nothing like the experience. And my NOAA Teacher at Sea experience was one of the most amazing professional development things that I have done. So I got there and I had a really awesome room with lots of space. We had 2 bunks on one side and 2 on the other. I got there first, so I got to choose which bunk I wanted to have. So I picked the one with the window. And this is my roommate, Alex, who is a graduate student from the University of New Hampshire. And on a research vessel, you work 12-hour shifts. So I had the 4 a.m. to 4 p.m. shift, and she had the 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. shift. And what was great about having the morning shift or the day shift is that I got to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And they feed you really well on these vessels. There's also a game room or entertainment room where you can watch movies. This is the mess hall, and this is us eating together, and an example of some of the food that I got to experience. So life at sea was actually really nice. One of the things that you do as a NOAA scientist or teacher at sea is that you have to engage in education outreach. So they want you to blog about your experience while you're at sea. Well, I was a video editor before I went to graduate school. So instead of blogging, I actually like vlogging, where you actually create videos. But there are some challenges to creating videos while you're at sea. The biggest one is bandwidth. You have a limited amount of bandwidth, and videos hog that up. So in order for me to create these videos and then push them up to YouTube or social media, I had to do it in the middle of the night when there was nobody up or just a few people up. Also, there was something really interesting about the Oscar Dyson, and in that, depending on its orientation, whenever you were within 20 degrees of due north, you lost the internet. So you could be in the middle of the night pushing up a video, and all of a sudden you feel the ship start to turn, and you're like, no, because you've lost bandwidth. And then the last thing is the equipment. I had 2 goals for myself. One was to shoot time-lapse videos. The other was to shoot 360 videos, because that's the newest thing that's out there. So I bought some really fancy cameras. I bought a $500 camera, which was waterproof because you're on a boat and you don't want things to get wet and you don't want them to fall overboard. The very first day I was setting up my camera, I set it right here, and then we hit a wave and I heard my camera go doot, 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 and into here, the sink. Not thinking anything of it, I went to look in the sink and I realized it was a sink to the bottom of the ocean floor. Yeah, I lost my camera the very first time I went to use it. But luckily the NOAA scientist had a camera that I could use, and I was able to continue with my vlogging. Here is my first video.
Everyone. One of my first questions coming to Alaska was, where exactly are we going? Before leaving port, there's a detailed map created of exactly where we are going and how we will get there. The plan of the day is posted daily and is color-coded to indicate what we are projected to accomplish on that given day. The first few days of our research adventure takes us down the Shelikof Strait, which separates Kodiak Island from the mainland Alaska. It is about 240 kilometers long and approximately 44 kilometers wide. The NOAA ship Oscar Dyson follows this path, which is composed of transect lines and cross transects. The transect lines are the long lines running parallel between the two land masses, and the cross transects run parallel to the shore. I was surprised to learn that paper charts are still used. They are required on ships unless the ship is equipped with two completely independent digital mapping systems. The ship's position, which mariners call the fix, is charted every half hour unless the ship is within 3 nautical miles of land. Then the fix is taken every 15 minutes. There is a detailed digital map generated in real time using GPS that shows the ship's current location along with a lot of additional information. The green contours indicate the depth to the bottom of the ocean floor in meters. Red contours are shallow areas with less than 50 meters to the bottom, and brown indicates the land. The transect lines are perpendicular to the green contour lines and are the research focus areas. Can you find the Oscar Dyson in the image? It is the yellow, almost triangular-shaped object located here. And as we cruise along the transect line, the researchers mark areas they want to fish. The navigation process looks easy, but a lot of thought and time goes into making sure we are on course and collecting the needed data.
That was the first video that I created, and it took me over an hour in the middle of the night to push that up to YouTube. And to give you an example of how hard it is to do that while you're at sea. A non-technical challenge that I was worried about going to Alaska was getting seasick. How many of you guys get seasick? Not fun. And so I got the patch and I brought it with me. But luckily, even the NOAA scientists were surprised. It was amazingly smooth up in Alaska. It was smooth sailing. Good morning, everyone, from aboard the Oscar Dyson in Alaska. And it's a gorgeous morning, and behind me is Katmai National Park, and you can see these amazing glaciers just coming right off of the mountains here. And today is when I'm going to start my first, fishing of pollock. And so I'm going to have to identify and sort and even cut up and examine some pollock this morning. And so it's going to be a really fun and interesting experience. But what can I say? Look at this morning. Gorgeous here up in Alaska. So that was almost every day. It was nice, smooth as glass. It was amazing. But then I had to go fishing. Now, as a kid, I fished when I was like 9 and 10. And I was the person who, I'd catch the sunfish and I wouldn't touch it. I would put it on the ground and I'd unhook it with my foot and then kick it back into the water. Anybody do that? Was I the only one? So the fish lab is interesting because I was really like, am I going to have to touch these crazy things? And I went from like, oh my goodness, what is this, to, wow, this is actually really cool. And to give you a better idea of what it was like to actually work in the fish lab, here is a video.
Hello, everyone. Twice a year, scientists from the Alaska Fisheries Science Center board the NOAA ship Oscar Dyson to conduct acoustic trawl surveys within the Gulf of Alaska or Bering Sea. The purpose of the survey is to estimate the abundance of Alaska pollock using acoustics and by catching small samples. Once the catch is hauled on board, it gets processed in the fish lab. Now, I will admit that the idea of getting elbow deep into fish wasn't my idea of a fun time at sea, but I have been pleasantly surprised by how much I have enjoyed working in the fish lab. The Fish Lab is a digitally enhanced workspace with touchscreen monitors, digital scales, and measuring devices all laid out in a very functional way. The catch is sent down a conveyor belt where the pollock gets sorted out from other sea creatures. It's a fun, interesting challenge to move the pollock down the line while picking out things, big and small, that don't belong. The catch is then weighed and put into a bin where the sex of each fish can be determined. This involves cutting them open to see their reproductive organs and then tossing them into the male or female bins so that they can be measured. This, by far, is my least favorite activity, the cutting open of the pollock. But that didn't stop me from slicing and dicing on the Dyson. It's good to overcome your fears, and I had plenty when it came to picking up fish and cutting them open.
Reading from the fish lab, and what I got to do is I have to slice the pollock to determine what sex it is. And this is how you do it. You take it, got your knife, and you slice down the side, and then you look inside, and that's a female right here. And then you take it, and you toss it in the Shelikof.
The next step in the process is to measure the length of each fish. The ichthy stick is a clever tool developed by the NOAA scientists to measure the pollock. Each fish is put on the board and is measured by tapping a magnetic finger pointer at the fork length. The otoliths, which are the inner ear bones, are taken and shipped to the NOAA Research Center and are used to determine the age of the pollock by counting the number of growth rings. The data collected by the scientists are important for the sustainability of the fishery, and this process is supported by the fishing industry. I've had a great time learning about how we research Alaska pollock, and it makes me want to learn more about the sustainability of the food I eat every day.
So how many of you would go slicing and dicing on the Oscar Dyson? Raise your hands that you could cut up those pollock. I was actually really surprised by how much I loved my experience at sea. So I got to do time-lapse videos there. You saw those sequences. I also got to do some 360 images. One of my favorite places was the bridge. And the reason why I loved it is because it had all of these windows across the whole front of it. And these 360 images, normally you could turn this 360 degrees, but it gives you an idea of what the bridge was like. And so I wanted to do videos, 360 videos, but 2 weeks into our cruise, we had engine trouble, and we had to return to Kodiak. So my cruise got cut short. Instead of 3 weeks, I was only there for 2 weeks, and I didn't get to do my 360 videos. However, it was one of the best professional development activities that I've ever done. The NOAA scientists were amazing. The Oscar Dyson crew were awesome, and I just loved every minute of it. So these were the scientists that I worked with in the fish lab. These are the NOAA scientists that were part of the crew, and these are the Oscar Dyson crew who run the ship. And so I got to spend a lot of time talking to them and interviewing them. One of the best parts about going to Alaska, the scenery and the sunsets. Absolutely breathtaking. Every night I would get up, well, I got up at 4 a.m., so I got to see the sunrise. I am not a morning person, but the sunrise was amazing. And then a lot of times I would get up and go see the sunset. Now remember, I did this over the summertime, so you had really long days up in Alaska. Simply gorgeous. And one of the best parts about my experience is that they really liked a lot of the pictures that I took and the things that I did, so they made me the representative of this year's Teacher at Sea program. And so this is the ad. Thank you. This is the ad that they used. I want to end by saying I was really hesitant at being pushed out of my comfort zone, but that is where most of your learning happens. And so I'm really thankful to NOAA and the Teacher at Sea program. Thank you.